Us, everyone. Welcome to the Kyokushin Shuffle, the Japan Chronicles. Trust you're all well. Let's start off with a big happy birthday to Sosai Masayama. 100 years up above. A big us. All of you, I'm sure, just bowed as well. Happy birthday to Sosai. What a meaningful figure, and everything that comes with it, that he's been in our lives. And I'm sure we'll talk in depth a bit later in regards to what Sosai has given us all in probably a 18-hour episode. But what we've got here, we've got a really cool guest, Sam Gilbert, Sensei Sam. Shihan Sean, thanks for joining us. But we'll go to Shihan Sean, and then we'll go to Sensei Sam.
Thanks, Sensei Pat. Yeah, no, it's great to again have another guest on.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've had a chance to actually talk to Sam in person through Zoom.
Sure.
We've texted back and forth and that, and he's in Tokyo. I'm in Nagoya, so we're both suffering from the summer, as I said last week with Nick on the show.
Yeah.
It's getting worse. I think it's 37, 38 degrees at the moment. It's insane, but. Yeah, it was great because some big things have been happening in the Kyokushin community of late.
Yep.
Shinkyokushin, led very successfully by Shihan Kenji Midori, and if you don't know who he is, you don't know Kyokushin. I love going back to his world tournament, and just that even that final with Master Shihan, that was just, you watch it now, you still get goosebumps, you know what I mean? But yeah, Shinkyokushin, what a level, I must say, a very level-headed, strong organization that doesn't get caught up in any political bullshit. They just, focus on the good of the student, and really successful. And actually, they're really well looked after in terms of the way TV networks, well, cable, are behind them and showing these tournaments and things like that. So if you're in Japan and you've got access to cable TV, you're able to catch the action on a regular basis. So, leading in from there, Sensei Sam's just been involved in a huge, as you can see from his background there, very successful tournament that's just been run recently. I think, if I can remember the title properly, Karate Dream or something was it called, Sam?
Yes, yeah, the Karate Dream Festival.
Yeah.
So it was just last week.
Word festival, yeah.
Well,
festival anything to make it a party, but so anyway, I mean, maybe we can start off there because there were 3,000 plus participants. It had kumite, it had kata. It was open to not only Shinkyokushin people but other styles, people who've gone independent or what have you, were able to participate as well. So by all looks of it, it was really successful. But Sensei Sam was there officiating, I believe. So perhaps we can, start straight away and throw it over to you, Sam, and you can tell us a little bit about what went on.
Sure. I guess before we do that, I just want to say, congratulations you guys on what you've done with this show so far. Pat, hold you in very high esteem for what you've done with the podcast. And I think combining it with Shihan Sean's knowledge and experience has been a really great thing for not only people outside of Japan, but for me, even though I've lived here for most of my adult life, I'm still learning a ton. I don't have the historical knowledge or the in-depth knowledge of the politics that you do, Sean. And so I've got a lot out of the show and listening to the great guests that you've had on already.
Thanks.
In terms of, Shinkyokushin as an organization, I think that since it sort of made the transition from Kyokushin to Shinkyokushin, initially we actually lost a lot of branch chiefs and a lot of dojos because of the name change. I think that I think there's a lot of people in the karate world that felt like it was a move away from tradition, a move away from what Sosai had created. And there was a lot of apprehension. And even the people that stayed with the organization, a lot of people didn't feel comfortable with the name change.
Nice.
I can remember it happened before the 8th World Tournament in 2003. And I know, Sean, you've mentioned Yui Shihan several times on the show, and Yui Shihan actually came out for our national tournament in 2003, and he did a demonstration. And so he comes out because this was 20 years ago now, so it's not like you're hearing updates all the time on social media. You're hearing mumblings and whispers, and if you wanted to search things on the internet, you might be able to find things, but it's not like if something happens 3 hours ago, it's up on Twitter, it's up on Instagram now. So Yui Shihan comes out to do his demonstration, and he's got this weird looking logo on his doggy, and everyone's just, what the oh, gee, that's the new logo. Imagine. I hate it. And there's so many, as is quite common in Australia, a lot of people have got tattoos of the old Kyokushin logo, and so there was a lot of apprehension. But I think that a testament to the leadership of Midori Shihan. I mean, not only was he an incredible fighter, you look at, and again, I think you've talked before about the fighters that came out of Jonan Shibu, starting with Midori, and then Yamaki and Kazumi and Tsukamoto. But talking to Tsukamoto about that dojo, the branch chief, Hiroshige Shihan, who passed away a few years ago, Tsukamoto was quite frank in saying, he was an okay instructor. He ran a branch fairly well, but it was Midori Shihan that was the real motivation, and he motivated everyone else to train, and he brought up this next generation of multiple world champions. And he's basically done the same thing on a larger scale with the Shinkyokushin organization. So whilst initially there was this apprehension and actually, a bit of an exodus of branch chiefs, in the 20 years since, there's been, double, triple, 10 times the branch chiefs wanting to come back in, and people from other organizations wanting to join. I never had the honor and the pleasure of meeting Sensei, but the aura that I get with Midori Shihan is as comparable as I can imagine. He has that X factor, and to be around him is something really special. I think also that the organization's direction in terms of their contribution to charity and labeling themselves as an MPO. Obviously it's part of it is doing the right thing in terms of being charitable and giving back to the community, but there is also like a commercial element to that as well. So since 2003 that we've been supporting the Kotsuzui Bank charity, the Bone Marrow Bank charity, and I think that has brought a different level of respect and credibility, appreciation from and so that has allowed us to get these media contracts and basically get a bigger reach to Shinkyokushin.
The great thing there is that it's not a greedy organization. You share what success you have in those different ways, and like Midori Shihan doesn't showboat. He's just like you said, when you talk about his position in, bringing up the next generation of fighters. So Sensei lives through that front line. You've got others in the background. You've got the elders, but you've got people like him who still to this day are still very technically proficient, just awesome martial artists. So they're able to put on their dogi and not just do 10 punches for show's sake. They actually can still do the business. So they lead by example that way, as well as running the organization. And I think that's the perfect balance there, but also very humble. Whenever I've heard him speak, he doesn't gloat. He's very appreciative of the people around him. And just the way you guys can actually go into any other tournaments, with the JK, is it the JK or the JFKO or the J? I can't remember the acronym for it.
JFKO,
yeah. So how he's allowed, no politics to come in, and that, if we can come together and A, go to different camps, B, go to different tournaments and not be slapped over the wrist if you didn't get permission or what have you. He's been very open from the start. And I think because the Shin in Shinkyokushin means new. If you're not familiar with the kanji, that first kanji at the top of Sam's photo there is Shin, which means new. So he's recreated part of it, but he's kept the essence. And that's the beautiful thing about it. It's got a great name in Japan and obviously a huge following worldwide. and it's all in the approach. So it's been great to see.
Yeah.
The Dream Cup itself, up until 2007, Dream Festival. That was the Dream Cup until a couple of years ago, and I guess like the number of people involved and the fact it was over 2 days. I think they decided to call it festival again, potential marketing thing. But up until 2007, they ran 2 separate tournaments: the All Japan Masters tournament, which is for the over 35s in certain age categories, and then the All Japan Junior tournament. And then 2008, they decided to combine those 2 tournaments and make it, this Dream Cup. So the focus is on, chasing your dream, challenging yourself and setting goals and trying to achieve those, and doing it in more of a family and a community environment where kids and the masters were sort of training for the one event and competing together and sort of bringing that dojo spirit together. And then since then, it's basically just grown and grown, and I think continued to grow even through COVID. And we'll sort of talk about in a second how things changed during COVID and how the organization went about changing certain rules and formats within the tournament to adjust for that. It's as I said, over 3,000 competitors this time, and a really cool event.
So that's great. I appreciate the heads up on all that. That's really cool to listen to from someone that's there. And my take on it is, Sensei, is how is the, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Is there a tournament structure around what is happening there in Japan? And we're talking Shinkyokushin here. So is this the pinnacle? Is this, I've heard you in the past say, there's a tournament one a month. How does the structure work to get to this? Or is it this and then other prefectures run their tournament and each student / dojo, your dojo, can go to whichever one it wants to go to?
Yeah. So, I mean, at each level, there's a national tournament, and the Dream Cup is pretty much the pinnacle for everyone outside the people that are fighting in the open tournaments. So those fighting in like the All Japan Open, All Japan Weight Division tournament, and then you're hoping to get selection for the World Tournament. Those tournaments are the pinnacle for them. But for everyone else, for your juniors, anywhere from like the Yochen, the kindergarten, up to they even have categories for university students, which it becomes a little murky because actually some of the top fighters get to a very high level, especially the females, even definitely at university age. But there's some high school students that have been that have competed very successfully at the World Tournament. So, for everyone else, this is the pinnacle in terms of the tournament structure. You go from everything from like dojo tournaments. So you have a smaller dojo tournament. Some branches actually combine their dojo tournament with their grading. So they'll have a grading where they go through your normal, the Kilon, Ido, Kata, and then the Kumite side will actually be in a tournament format. And then you have like prefecture tournaments, and then you have what they call block tournaments. So you have the different regions like Kanto, which is Tokyo, and the neighboring regions like Chiba and Yokohama or Kanagawa, and those, and that sort of forms one block. And there's 7 of those within Japan. So that would be the equivalent to a state tournament in Australia. Right. And then you have the national tournament. So that's basically the way they're set out. But some block tournaments in smaller regions will be smaller compared to for example, Tsukumoto recently held the first ever Tokyo Tall tournament, so the Tokyo Metropolitan Tournament, and that was massive. I think that had over 1,000 competitors, and so, but that's also the pool of Tsukumoto, and these tournaments are open tournaments, so you can have like the Tokyo tournament had people from Kyushu, from all over Japan, and they're also within the branch chiefs in Japan. There are branch chiefs that are good friends from different areas. So you might have someone down in Kyushu who's got really close friends, the branch chiefs up in Hokkaido, and they're like, oh, can you come and support my tournament? So even though it's like a prefectural tournament, you might have fighters from all over the place.
You've got the Victorian championships, but the Sydney crew come down, and the regional come down, and it's all good. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
And if what's it like officiating at these? Because obviously now that your fighting days are over, unless you decide to go in the Masters, and live the dream once again. What's it like officiating in Japan? I mean, I've been involved in that myself,
Yeah.
but I'd like to hear your sort of perspective on it. I mean, now that you obviously act as a ref or a corner judge or whatever it may be. What's that
Yeah.
experience like for you?
Yeah. And it's funny. I think that I could maybe now get away with competing in the Masters, but like when I was like 37, if you're 37 and you like started training when you're 30 and you like work your way up, I think that's fine. But if you like started training when you were 8 and fought in 5 world championships and then retired, and then at 37, it's like, oh, I'm going to fight again. It's like, no, could fight in the Masters, but it's like, no, if you want to have a fight, you go back in the open until you can.
Sure.
I thought I'd maybe just take it back to my competition days as well, just to sort of highlight some of the differences between like the logistics involved with a tournament of 3,000 people compared to competition in Australia where a big tournament might be 100 people, right? So from a competitor's perspective, I guess the first thing I noticed was like, you have to commit to these events a long way ahead of time. I think in Australia, typically, if a tournament was on a Sunday, you probably had to have the application in like the Friday of the week before to give the organisers maybe a week and a bit to organise it. In Japan, it's generally for bigger tournaments, 2 to 3 months, and especially for something like the All Japan or the World Tournament.
Yeah,
the World Tournament draw will be announced pretty soon, so like they have to start getting the applications in really soon. I can remember when I was living in Fukuoka for the first chunk that I was in Japan. Everything was looked after, so I didn't really have to worry about getting applications in and things like that. When I came up to Tokyo, I was entering my first tournament, the All Kanto tournament, and I obviously wasn't sort of up on the entry process. And I think about 6 weeks out, I was like, "Oh, hey guys, can I sign up for the Kanto yet?" And they're like, "Sam, the applications were closed a month ago." And in the end, they sort of played the Bakugaijin, the idiot foreigner card, and managed to get me in the tournament.
Play that
but that's sort of
card.
the first thing. You need to get the applications in soon, and that's sort of just going ahead 15 years now. Everything's done via an app, so you basically have an app on your phone or access to a web page where you sign in, and then you've got all your data, and then you can basically, if there's a tournament there, you click on it, and then you can click which division you're entering as a dojo, and you can submit all your dojo participants. So I think they're using technology now to streamline the application process rather than having a bunch of pieces of paper and sending them in for the tournament organizers to sort through all these pages. They get the data. And it goes straight onto a spreadsheet where the divisions and that are all automated. So that information is coming up straight away.
Yeah, right.
So that's the first thing was the entry forms. The tracking of the competitors. If you've got like 5 guys in the division, it's pretty easy to sort of track what's happening. Here, as you've known, Pat, you fought out in Japan several times. You have the number on the back of your door, the zekken, and that is generally sent out weeks in advance as well. And so you have to sew that onto your dogi. But Japan being Japan, and I'll give other examples of this. Everything has to be done by the letter. So you get a sheet showing you exactly where the zekken needs to be. If there's other things that need to go on your dogi, like sometimes you need to actually sew a sponsor's logo on as well. That needs to go on, not the right side, the left. Make sure it's the left. Everything needs to be. And actually, when I was living in Shikoku, the first time that I came out as an 18-year-old, the guy that I was living with and training with, Takezawa Senpai, was very big on the fact that sewing your zekken onto the dogi is a really important part of the preparation. So it's almost like preparing part of your armor. That becomes part of your identity in a way for that day. So making it look neat, which mine never was. I've never sewn anything in my life. You don't want a crooked zekken. So everything needs to be perfect. And I think the first couple of times I actually did it several times just to get it looking respectable. So that's sort of part of the process of preparing for the tournament. And then you go to a tournament, and you usually have the draw several weeks, or in the case of a big tournament like the All Japan, months in advance. And in the case of a tournament like the Dream Cup, you can see there you've got 12 different fighting areas. And so when you get the information about the fight, you'll have which fighting area you're on and then which fight number for every single fight. So I'm going to be fight number 30 on court 5. And just so that you have an idea of exactly, how long you have to prepare for each match, and you're able to time it that way. Also, in something like the Dream Cup, to try and make it as efficient as possible. Again, as you can see above my head here, you can see those 12 blocks. They represent the 12 fighting areas, and those numbers are which number fights. So if you're unsure, and especially if you're there as a team and you're coaching, you've got your piece of paper with your circled. I've got a fighter. Fight number 18 on court 5, and then the next one's fight 23 on court 9, and how to coordinate that. And you can look up at the screen, and then from an official's perspective, they had this same screen in the staff room, and the different staff rooms and branch chiefs areas and things like that. So go back, and because you have breaks between the judging sections that you do, go back and have a snack. You've got that there so that you're not running late, because it's happened to me before. You don't want to be late getting back to your allotted judgment time.
I'm tired. Fucking
in preparation for like the equipment. So now, traditionally you've got the red sash. If you're in red wrapped around, all the fighters need to provide that for themselves now, because and it makes sense. Like, you don't want to be sort of hunting around for the sashes that have been used from bouts before, and it might have sweat and blood after all the fights and stuff. So all the students have to have their own sashes now. And then also for the divisions where there's headgear, which is most of them at the Dream Cup, you have Velcro stick-on red bits, 1, 2, 3, and they have to be 3. They have to be in specific areas, and the students have them themselves. So basically, all the companies like Isami and Martial World that provide equipment and doggies, they'll have these for sale. So you can basically buy a tournament marker kit. So the fighters will bring that along and make sure they're prepared. And so you're within the draw. You're looking, if I'm my first fight, I'm going to be in red, but then if I win that, I'm on the bottom. So if I'm in white, so the fighters know, okay, you stick the things on for the first fight, take them off for the second. Obviously they're little kids that that have parents and coaches looking after them. But so it's organized in that way. Traditionally, you'll have 3 chairs on each side of the tatami leading up to the fight, and you need to be sitting on the third chair back, ready for the fight that's in 4 fights time. And so the people that are marking off who's here and making sure that they're actually in time for the fight, they'll mark off and make sure that you're sitting 3 fights ahead, so that you're not getting called off. Because there have been times in Australia where you're in the toilet in an RSL club and it's like,
a fighter.
in red, Sam Gilbert. What?
You
don't know what's going on. So it's
that flashback just hit me, and I'm sure it would with you, Sam, when you fought in Japan. When it happened to me, I'm like, what are we sitting here? What's going on? What are we sitting here for? And you've warmed up. We've warmed up. You do the warm up, then you sit down, and then ikiwaki, next fight, ikiwaki, next fight, and you mate 25 minutes, and then you get up and it's your turn. You're like, far out.
And I think that, and I think you get used to how much like you need to stay warm, and so you sit down just to basically tick the box so that the official knows that you're there. But then you can get up and stand to the side of those seats and move around a little bit. But I think if you're coming to Japan, you haven't fought in Japan, and you're told to sit, then what happens if I stand up? You're not really sure. So I think that just sort of comes with experience working in that system. As to your question before, as an official, when you're officiating in a big event like this, well, basically any tournament other than the big tournament like the All Japan, where there's typically 1, maybe 2 tatami, you basically, your official team is like a team. So you have your judges and referees. That's one part of it. But then you have like the announcer. So each tatami will have an announcer. They'll have like a couple of record keepers to make sure they're notating who wins and who loses. They'll have the timekeeper, to throw in the beanbag at the end of the round. And interestingly, over the last few years, they've had big timers in front of the tatami to so that there's not any confusion, because sometimes when like a time stop is called to address a foul or an injury or uniform something, then there's some mix up with the timing, and I think that it's just trying to take out some of that confusion, I guess, so that everyone's on the same playing field. So the time is the time. There's no confusion. So you've got big timers there. So you've got your timekeeper. You've got a guy whose job is literally just to put a flashcard if there's been a chui, a genten, or a wazari. Because that's another thing too. If you're judging, and especially if you're judging 100 fights a day, and you get to the end of the round, it's like, how many chuis were there? So they have basically these big cards they flip over to remind the judges about any scores or fouls that have occurred. And I've just written down it as I was thinking before. And this is something that I did at the JFKO tournament. I wasn't actually judging or reffing. I was the equipment checker. So you have someone whose responsibility it is just to check the equipment. So you have one person to make sure the person sitting down has the right number, they're ready for their match, 3 matches ahead. And then and that person will usually be a volunteer, and they've usually got some experience in karate, but they don't need to be like a black belt or whereas the equipment checker needs to be someone sort of equivalent to a referee or judge sort of status. So they have a strong idea about what needs to be aligned equipment wise. But they were very strict.
Give you a bit of
room.
So
we had to.
Yeah. No, that's it. I was just saying, I'll give you a bit of room to breathe there, because the detail is unbelievable. Appreciate your notes on that.
Well, I think what Sam says there, Japan, it's very much process focused.
Yeah,
the whole culture.
Yeah,
it may not be the most efficient way sometimes from a Western point of view, but when it comes to things like this, everything's delegated, so everything runs smoothly. There's no room for error, because it's a group responsibility focused culture as well. So one person's mistake is everyone's mistake, and they take that very seriously. So they want to iron out all those creases before the day. And I mean, I can remember back in the day, when's this, 95, when I first moved over for the last time, because I've been here ever since. Going through, this is before, there were splits upon splits upon splits and what have you, and we never go into that too much on the show. But back then, when the IKO 1 or Matsui's faction was the largest, there was still a lot of process in terms of refereeing qualifications and stuff. So you had to go and do a ref course, and it was leveled at different stages. So you would do one so that you could act as a corner judge at a regional tournament, for example. I'll just give you a couple of examples here. And then you go up and you do some more seminars or workshops, and then you'd be qualified to maybe be a corner judge at the nationals. But that's a few years later on. And then you do some more, get more experience, and then you get licensed to be a center judge or the ref, the center ref, right? And then that would be domestic level, and then there would be an international license. So it was layer upon layer, but they gave you enough exposure at regional tournaments to gain that experience where there weren't so many people, so that when you came to something like this, which is 3,000 competitors, or the nationals or the worlds, like Sam keeps saying, everyone's on the same page. There's no room for error, because these attract a lot of spectators. So it's not just for the fighters, it's not just for the organizers and the guests that come, but the paying punters that are coming along to see something. They want to see it run smoothly, and they want to be able to look at the booklet they get, work out this, jigsaw puzzle that's happening as they follow the fighters themselves. but that what they see on the page is actually happening right in front of them. And so that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes there. Whereas I can remember in New Zealand, or it's probably the same in Australia, you get close to a tournament, it's like, okay, let's get the black belts together, and it might be at a camp, or it might be at a black belt training session or seminar, and you'll dedicate some time for refereeing technique. But there's no license as such. There's no sort of driven process. It's like, okay, we're all using the same commands here. Yeah, you know what to say in this instance. And you get that run through it, but you don't get enough exposure on a regular basis like you do here to actually polish your craft.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So Shinkyokushin, Sam, do you still have that process in place where you got to do, sort of focus workshops on reffing or that anymore, or you're pretty much
actually not? I mean, yeah, I think that I think that'd be good if they did that. But I know we used to, anyone reffing for the Dream Cup back in the day had to attend a course like on the Friday night before it started.
Oh, okay.
But they don't really do that anymore. And I guess that they think of it more as like a mentor type of an arrangement. So yeah, when you're going through your day as a judge, you'll typically, after every block, so usually there's somewhere between like 8 and 10 fights at a time. And this is another thing, you're sent out in advance, the team, the refereeing team. So it's not just whoever they put together on the day. You've got the refs, and you'll have usually an A and a B team, sometimes even a ABC. So you actually get more rotation, which is good. You get a little bit more of a break. But yeah, you can look out in advance. It's like, oh, I have to go with that Shihan. He scares the shit out of me, and he's can't stuff up. But which fights you're going to be judging for. So that, again, looking, if you go to the staff room to have a bite to eat, you can see, I'm starting back again at fight number 39. So I'll just make sure I'm back by then. But after every block, you'll have a little bit of a debrief. So you'll get off the tatami and just chat. And it's like, and the main referee will ask you any issues, maybe just, can we try and be a little bit stricter on pushing? There was a little bit pushing there. Okay. And, cool. I need to get a little bit more information about that in order to make the proper judging. And then maybe if there's a newer, younger, or someone that's newer to judging, the more senior people of that panel might pull them aside and say, just maybe, because sometimes I think when you start judging, there's a little bit of a hesitancy, especially to call fouls. It's like, how strict do I be? Especially now in Shinkyokushin, they're very strict on pushing and also head contact, because you've got the kids are wearing these head guards with these face shields. And so when they come in to engage, they're often clashing heads. Now, it's not a deliberate headbutt. Yeah. It's just that they're these tiny little people with these big face shields.
Trying to get as close as they can, Yeah,
and the thing is, like back in the day when there was a little bit of scrapping, we would just wave both flags. And so the referee would separate them. And then there's a bit of pushing, grabbing, wave both flags. And then in the end, like after 3 or 4 of those, it's like, all right, aka, chuchi. Chuchi, don't do it again. Get back at it. But in Shinkyokushin, they're very strict. You wave the flag for who went first. And so to gauge when someone comes in and makes head contact or does a bit of pushing, shoving, maybe there's a little bit of clinching. It's like, who clinched first? Oh, I don't know. And so that can be quite difficult. And sometimes it's a bit of like reassurance from the senior members of the judging panel. It's just, go with what you saw, and we're never going to be right 100% of the time. That's why there's 5 people on the panel. We can sort of support each other, and between the 5 of us, we should most of the time get the right result. But I think, like you said, Sean, it's just all reps. It's like anything, any skill just needs to be done and done again. And so we're so lucky out here that the tournaments are so big. There's so many tournaments that you're doing a lot of reps. And I think, you go to something like the World Tournament, and probably not as much as in the olden days, but people are always bitching about the Japanese judges being biased. I think that's the thing. But I think that you think about the way that the organization is structured, the Japanese judges are just doing so many tournaments, so many fights, doing these debriefing, and you're getting such on the same page that, and also conforming, because, our sport is a subjective one. At the end of the day, it's, who do I think controlled that fight? Right, like the criteria for judgment, the tatami control, the forward pressure, the kekazu, how many shots you actually landed, and how much damage was done. So there's those three basic elements, and it's up to the individual to interpret which competitor was more superior in those different aspects, but more importantly, which of those aspects they consider more important. And I'm still sometimes out if I'm watching a fight where someone is moving really well, landing hard, landing a little bit more and a little bit harder than the other guy, but the other person is pushing forward and putting more forward pressure on. For me, like combat-wise, I want to be able to hurt the person. I want to be able to hurt the person more. But in Japan, it's a little bit more on this visual control of the match. And so sometimes, I will be in the opposite way. And actually, a couple of times on the weekends, Tsukamoto's like, you still just like the clean technique, don't you, rather than the forward pressure. And I said, hey, my that still wins. So then you go
I was going to ask you, just in that theme, because you've trained so long there and with some goats like Tsukamoto and so on. And then just from afar, obviously, when we would get there, and then that last, as we know, that last 30 seconds is that push of control, take superiority of the fight that the Japanese were just sensational at. They just dictated the tempo. And then when it was time to go, that gear change. You would have, am I right in saying when you trained as well, was that a key focus that they were instilling in your game as well? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah, for sure. And actually that was pointed out as a weakness early on. So yeah, I did sort of focus on that rush.
Because of just the way you're saying how they look at the refereeing, and it's like, right, now you've caught my eye on that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's the way they train, when the way you train for a tournament here. Like whenever you're on the mat, you always hear the Japanese side saying, last 30 秒, right? So this is the last 30 seconds. 30 秒is 30 seconds, right? But you got the guys yelling that out. But in the build up to the tournament, and Nick did this, I think, when he went to Montreal. If you have a look at his videos of the thing he did last year in Montreal, right, where he got a guy in the middle and he got a line of people to come in, and he had to spar each person for 30 seconds, and then they would just change and change and change. Okay, and it's just that learning what that 30 seconds is and how to push yourself. And that's a different type of fighting training as well. But that's what the Japanese are really good at. So when you're fighting, you sort of know, okay, this could go either way. You've got a feeling like this is pretty close, but even if you're on top, and again, going back to Nick, I think we were at a tournament, this was maybe 12 years ago, officiating together, a very small thing. But there was a master's section, and there was a few guys over, and Nick was giving them advice, and he said, okay, whatever you do, don't gas out before those last 30 seconds. And those last 30 seconds, even if you feel like you're behind the 8 ball, just try and push them off the mat for 30 seconds. Just rush them, keep rushing them. And he goes, because look at all the judges, they're Japanese. That's what they're going to be looking at. And it's that last impression that you set could bring the fight back your way. And he goes, he was talking from experience. So it's your sort of, I guess, mental prep as well in that regard. And the way you reflect that into your training is what the Japanese are really good at, because they know what the judges are looking at in that last 30 seconds.
Well,
so
Sensei Sam, the reason I brought it up was because you just brought it up, and I'd never heard those three. To be honest with you, I've never heard those three key things as a guide, as a pillar to judge. Okay, what did those three? That was really cool that you shared that. I mean, you think it, but then it's part of the DNA of the decision for you guys in Shinkyokushin. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, I think even in MMA, I think even like when they go through the rules of the octagon, I think it's what octagon control, effective damage, and I think it's basically the same thing.
Couple of you're right.
You're right.
Hey,
so when you sort of.
We could go for hours about that. I mean, that's really cool. What that's exactly why Shihan and I obviously communicate. And I said, hey, how cool is this? Your post you put up. And I said, we'd love to get, and we had you on our list. And then I said, let's get him on now while the hype of that event and Sensei coming off it. So that's really cool. That was really cool.
Are you going to be officiating at the Worlds as well? Or?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
No, that's a bit above my pay grade.
Is that the big boy
so
club, is it? Right, okay.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's a branch chief, sort of national representative branch chief for that one. Yeah.
And Sensei, on a side note now, to get your brain off that, you just said you've been doing other forms of training, and how is other things going down there for you? Up there for you?
Yeah, good. I've I guess the last probably 10 months I've been doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, man.
Jiu-jitsu and loving that. I guess over the last few years, and probably some of the guests you've had on and some other podcasts have got me thinking about karate a little bit differently as well. You know, for a lot of my life, karate was a sport, and I wasn't ashamed to say that. You know,
yep.
My focus was trying to become world champion, and there wasn't much leeway to focus too hard on the other elements of karate. But then, you know, being retired and not having that as a focus, I've been starting to think more about karate as a fighting art, and trying to include a little bit more of that in the teaching that I do.
Yeah.
But then also trying to branch out and do a little bit more. And I've always wanted to do jiu-jitsu. I wasn't confident that my body would hold up, and my wife would probably argue that it hasn't, but I'm struggling through, and it's going really well. I think this rash guard highlights a couple of things. One, my recent fascination with jiu-jitsu. Two, my entrepreneurial spirit, and three, my habit of doing things in a rush and not doing them correctly. I basically just talking with a friend and came up with this tagline: "Stop scrolling, start rolling," because he was there rolling on his phone. It's like, stop that. And it's like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Let's throw it on a Rashi. So I had 25 of these things made up in China, because being a business, you're always looking for these little opportunities, right? But I did it too quickly, and I actually sent the wrong typescript to the guy, and so you'll notice that it actually says stop scrolling, start rolling. So I had to get that fixed.
I think then stop scrolling, like crying, like stop.
So it's not just in the look; it's okay. Nice.
But I'm getting that fixed and sent out again. But I guess doing jiu-jitsu, I mean, it's a completely different thing, and it's a lot of fun because I'm still in that sort of honeymoon phase with the art. But it has made me doing the jiu-jitsu training and looking at the way it's taught. It's made me think about karate in a little bit of a different way, and focusing a little bit more on the tactical side, because when I was competing in karate, it was, for me, very much about like technicality and physicality, not so much about tactics. So I was very good as a technician, and I was reasonably strong and had very good stamina, and I could basically get by on that. But then going to the tournaments now, especially as a judge, I'm sort of thinking about how the tactical side sort of works in with that. And when you're doing jiu-jitsu, if you're sparring with someone who's much higher level than you, they're not thinking about reacting to your technique that you're doing now. They're thinking about how they're going to react, and how that's going to force you to react, and how they're going to react to your reaction. And they're like 4 or 5 steps ahead. And I'm now sort of watching karate with the view of, all right, how are you going to, and training with that sort of process in mind. How is this person going to react to what I'm going to do, and then how am I going to react with that, and almost sort of setting up a little bit more traps. And it's probably something that would have benefited me 25 years ago when I was competing. But it's an interesting thing, and I'm sort of really enjoying going through that process. And it's always good to sort of change your perspective and learn new things once in a while.
Absolutely. I'm going through the similar journey as you, and I've been doing it similar. And the thing I've noticed a lot is 2 sides. One of the key ones is, and I haven't spoken openly about this, but one of the key ones is, I'm not the teacher. It's not my dojo. So I get to just listen and learn. And my brain has just grabs everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not in a, controlled hat on. I'm relaxed. I get to chill out, and I get to learn and get back into it. And again, your fourth band said, say I'm third in the respective years. And it got to that point as well. I've achieved, I've committed and given everything to the arts. And then number 2 was the lapel. I love the lapel. we use our lapel in Kyokushin, and the lapel gives everyone the shits. And no one, I guess, listens to it that trains with me in jits, but I'm a mad fan of the lapel. I grab the lapel, I use it, and I'm just going to work on it. And there's all these movements we do that get the lapel in, like this one, for example, right?
Yeah.
And you get the lapel there, and there's some really cool stuff. And again, then there's the other side of it, hey Sensei, where you have to tap. You just got mauled, and you got to go through the whole, like, what the fuck? How'd you do that? How did that just happen? And that's another great eye-opening part. How are you going with things like that?
The tapping, like, I think I went through my karate competitive career with, I guess, the normal amount of ego that one does. And I think I got rid of that there. So I walk into the jiu-jitsu, I have no trouble I'm still very competitive, but I don't feel like I've got anything to prove. So if I have to tap, I tap. And I know firsthand the consequences of not tapping, because I understand musculoskeletally what is going to give way. But actually, and I think I posted this on my Instagram a while ago, I did have a hyperextended elbow, which I had to take some time off for training, and I sort of posted my rehab journey, the progressions that I went through. But like the lapel, I think there's nothing more satisfying than taking a piece of someone's clothing and choking them with it. I think it's just brilliant. But even like
maybe
controlling,
that's another rash guard. There's nothing more satisfying than the.
That's actually a really good idea, because I am looking for other taglines and making this a little bit more of a shop where people try and get some more creative rashy taglines.
Get people to send in different phrases, and you can just sort of bring them all together. Have a series on this, a series
listeners,
on that.
comment. Let Sensei Sam go for it. Yeah. Hey guys, we've got 5 more minutes left. It's flown as always, and but we can continue on for another 5. Sensei Sam, so what continues on through? You've done a massive event like this, Shinkyokushin. Great detail. Loved hearing it, and I'm sure you could talk for days about the organization that you've been with. Where to from here? When is the world tournament? What's happening at your end in Japan?
I guess just very quickly, the other thing I wanted to touch on was how things changed during COVID, and how that's actually continued on, because for the first year, 2020, basically all the events were cancelled. When they went back to doing events, it's like, well, how can we make this as safe as possible? And they basically, instead of just doing all the divisions all at once, so basically start at 9 a.m, first round of this, all the way through, and second round all the way through, they've broken it up into sections. So you basically have 3 sections. So you have a certain amount of divisions starting at 9 o'clock. The next division's starting at 11:30, and then the next division starting at 2:30. So that way, you've only got a certain number of people in the facility at once. During COVID, for most of the tournaments, including the Dream Cup, you could only have 2 supporters, like 2 seconds, with you in the whole arena. Which, I think that was for the Dream Cup. For other tournaments, you could only have 1. So we would have kids fighting, and only 1 parent could go and watch. Like, it was pretty strict like that. But and then they'd have, like, with the face face guards for the headgear, you basically have this inner plastic shield which goes inside the headgear to guard against the spit. And they've just taken that out now. And basically, you would wear your mask until you got onto the 3rd seat back, and then there was a rack where you could put your mask, put your headgear on with the shield, and then you come off the mat, take the headgear off, put your mask on. It was very systematized. But what they've actually kept that sectioning in place, not only for the Dream Cup, but for all the other tournaments here. I think they've realized that it just makes it a lot cleaner, less people in the arena. I think that it takes away a little bit in terms of, like, the build up for the finals going on all throughout the day. But I think that the benefit of having less people in it at a time definitely outweighs that. Wow. So I think that's one major change that they've made as a result of COVID. This has actually been beneficial. The World Tournament is October 14th and 15th. And so, it's in Japan. It's all about, will Japan manage to hold on? Because in Shinkyokushin, the Japanese still haven't lost. And I think the rest of the world is like a little bit of, can we beat Japan? But they're less focused on that. Like, I think it's very much us against them in Japan. But for the rest of the world, it's they're focused on their own countries and their own fighters. And yeah, I mean, I think that's it'll be tough for Japan. I think
we'll have to get you back on when that after or probably afterwards would be best day to summarize it all. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Well, that's epic.
That's great.
Yeah, Sean, you got anything else to add for Sensei before we leave?
No, just exciting to hear the goings on. And I think, Sam really explained it well. For those that haven't been to Japan for a while or don't get to see what goes on behind the scenes, I think what you've done is explained, you've unpacked a lot of detail in a really easy to follow way. So I really appreciate that. And it sounds like you're enjoying your martial arts journey, and, I mean, Sensei used to say it's all in the reflection, that way to improve as a martial artist is how we reflect upon what we're doing. And I think that you can put that into any part of your life anyway, but obviously with your cross training and jiu-jitsu and that now as well, it's complementing your karate, or it's giving you a different perspective on that too, like you said, the tactics and stuff like that. So I mean, I've been doing traditional jiu-jitsu, the Japanese side, not a lot of rolling and stuff, but a lot of locks and stuff. And being the beginner again, not having to teach, getting wrapped, around a million different times and coming away with swollen wrists, forgetting what it's like to be a beginner again. It's just such a joyful process because you've got no other eyes on you. It's all about you. You enjoy the growth that you experience, and you take those small steps again, and you don't have to think, okay, well, what am I gonna do tonight? It's all done for you. So you can just sit back and like Pat said, absorb it like a sponge. But I think the beauty of all three of us is that we've already got our base in karate. So whatever we do outside of that complements what we're doing inside our own karate sort of life as well, because we can see the connections. And I mean, I personally feel that, but that certainly reminded me, what you're talking about there reminded me of that aspect of it as well. It's a lifelong journey, your fighting days are done, but now you get to grow as a karateka in a different way, or as a budoka, a martial artist, by venturing out. And I think that's something we should all, that's what Sensei did. So, and so if we're following his path and, in a sense, we should challenge ourselves as well. So, thanks for that. It was really enlightening.
Sensei Sam, thanks so much. We really appreciate your time. We're all busy. It was great to lock this in because it was looking like it was going to be 2 years.
It was touch and go.
We'll catch each other.
Glad we can make it work.
Thank you so much, Abigos. Have you got anything else to add, Sam? It's up to you. No problem.
No, just appreciate your time, guys. Always great to chat, and great to chat to first time, Sean. And as I said, love what you guys are doing with the show. Keep it up.
Thanks,
and love to chat again soon.
Happy birthday to Sensei Masatatsu Oyama, 100 years old today. Happy heavenly birthday to Sensei. Also, everyone, thanks for listening to the Japan Chronicles. Arrivederci. Keep training hard.